Please be seated. Good morning, everyone. Leave got my notes here. A few weeks ago, as we were preparing for the bishop's visit, the adult ed class led by Reverend Noel walked through much of the Episcopal Church's catechism. For those unfamiliar with what a catechism is, it's a summary of the core ideas of a religion, often in a brief question and answer format. Ours starts on page 845 of the Book of Common Prayer. A catechism usually asks and answers serious questions, like, question, well, who is God the Father? Or, question, what is a sacrament? It tends not to answer the questions we really have, like, question, why do acolytes wear white nightgowns? Or, question, if we sing a hymn I don't know, should I just hum it or only listen? One of those adult ed questions focused on the serious question, what is the church? That question hit me across as I read this morning's This question hit me as I read this morning's readings. The most obvious whack across the intellect is a letter to the Corinthians that most scholars believe Paul wrote around 53 AD. I think scholars believe that Paul wrote it since, as we saw in today's reading, it has Paul's common rambling and passive aggressiveness. This is a saint I can relate to. Also, if you look at 1 Corinthians as a whole, it's kind of a catechism. Paul is giving guidance and correction. In today's reading, Paul is addressing the same question we asked in our adult ed session. Question, what is the church? If you want to zone out from my rambling and passive aggressiveness, you can read the Book of Common Prayer's Catechism answer starting on page 854. What I find interesting is that by 53 AD-ish, only 20-odd years after Jesus' death and resurrection, we find divisions that sound a lot like what we call denominations. I'm a Methodist. I'm a Catholic. I'm an Orthodox. I follow Jesus, but I don't like that formal religion stuff. The Episcopal Church tries to sound a little less divided by saying the Episcopal branch of it. But I always say I'm an Episcopalian. Paul doesn't like where this is going. Has Christ been divided? Yes. Well, Paul, unfortunately, the answer today seems to be yes. But maybe we're thinking of church a bit too narrowly. Perhaps we come up with an answer to question, what is the church, that can keep Christ undivided. We can use Paul's focus on those who proclaim the gospel, or more simply, the good news. Specifically for Paul, he seems to think that his role is to proclaim the good news that all have been reconciled to God by the cross of Christ. He isn't interested in baptizing anyone into any denomination. Question, what is the church? Answer, those that proclaim the good news that all have been reconciled to God by the cross of Christ. This sounds like the kind of short, concise answer a catechism would give. But if you're like me, though, you're asking, what does that mean? We can supplement what Paul says on what is the church with the other readings we had this morning. In Matthew, we heard that Jesus began to proclaim, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. I think this goes well with Paul's proclaiming the good news. Sub-question in our catechism now appears. Question, what does the kingdom of heaven has come near mean? What happens next in Matthew, I think, gives clarification and depth to that. First, we see Jesus creating a community who will pray, support, and study together when he calls the fishermen to follow him. Church is not a solo exercise. It's going to take people, complex, messy people, relating to each other for the kingdom of heaven to be present. Question, What is the church? Partially, it's a community who commits to be in relationship with God through prayer, mutual support, and group study. I would add, even if the community disagrees among themselves on some things. The second thing Jesus does is cure disease and sickness among the people. You may remember being told at some point that in the culture of Jesus' time, and maybe even our own time, disease and sickness meant that you were cursed by God and were separated from the community. To cure somebody, restore them not only to health, but to wholeness. The kingdom of heaven brings renewed life. Question: what is the church? More answer. The church is a community who shares the new life and wholeness they have found in God to those around them. Or, to put it in an Isaiah-like way, the community reaches out to those living in a deep darkness. The deep darkness of loneliness. The deep darkness of exclusion. The deep darkness of unworthiness. The deep darkness of hate. The deep darkness of fear. The deep darkness of violence, and shares the light of God's love, breaking the burden of our politics, our prejudice, and our indifference has placed upon them. Okay, we got proclaiming the good news part of Paul's catechism answer. What about the reconciled to God by the cross of Christ part? There are a couple of ways we can understand Paul's focus on the cross of Christ. The first, and a common way, is a transactional understanding of Christ's saving action. We humans understand transactions well. This or that. In a transactional view, God needed the sacrificial this to be reconciled to creation, the that. Since nothing in creation is good enough to be the this, God, God's self, had also supplied the this to give us the that. Which, when you strip it to its essence, that God needed Jesus to be a sacrificial victim to get creation right with God, makes no sense. It's like me saying, I will sell you a car for $5,000, and I really, really need the $5,000. But since you don't have $5,000, I will take $5,000 of my own money. I'll give it to you, you give it back to me, and you can have the car. Absurd. A better way to hear reconciled to God by the cross of Christ is that the reconciled to God is the essence of the good news. In fact, in the cross of Christ, God has shown us dunderheads that nothing, not even humiliating, painful death perpetrated by those who thought they had all the power, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And that, my friends, is just plain foolishness to us transactional humans. Question: what is the church? Answer: the church is a community rooted in the understanding that nothing can separate us from the love of God, who commits to be in relationship with God through prayer, mutual support, and group study. This community shares the love and wholeness they have in God's love to each other and to the world. If we are rooted in God's love, then the trunk that is Christianity, the branch that is Episcopal, the twig that is the Diocese of Olympia, and the leaf that is Redeemer does not divide Christ. I think it makes God's love, the root, more available to more of creation. The many branches, twigs, and leaves make more oxygen and shade for an overheated world, no matter how frozen the streets of Minneapolis. Very much like the parable of the mustard seed, the church has grown mightily. We can answer Paul and say that Christ has not been divided. Christ has become more diverse. To echo the psalm this morning, God is my light and my salvation. Whom then shall I fear? God is the strength of my life. What then shall I be afraid? One thing I've asked of God, one thing I seek, that I may be grafted into Christ's church all the days of my life. I've dragged you to that catechism Q&A of the church so I can talk to you about what I really wanted to talk about today, our annual meeting. In a little bit, we'll gather again downstairs to talk about our belief of God's love, Redeemer. It's right, we do, as we have responsibilities to meet and rules to follow. As most of you know, 2025 was a year of tough choices. It's hard to tell what season our leaf is in. I would love to think our leaf is in spring with growth abounding. Our leaf could be in late fall or early winter, just holding on to the next big wind. I don't know. But I do know this. The root is strong and full of life. Spring will come. New growth will occur somewhere, somehow. The trunk is thick and hardy. It is weathered far worse than today's storms. Yes, the leaf still has many difficult decisions, and our outcome is not assured. And if we do fall off the twig, our leaf will fertilize the tree so it can grow more abundantly. I also know this. Redeemer is not the organ or the music. Redeemer is not this building. Redeemer is not the land. Redeemer is a community rooted in the understanding that nothing can separate us from God's love, who commits to be in relationship with God through prayer, mutual support, and group study. This community shares the love and wholeness we have in God's love to each other and the world. We are the church, diverse, not divided.
It is the support of people like you that enables the various ministries of Episcopal Church of the Redeemer in Kenmore, Washington. Join us in person, in prayer, and in giving financially. To give financially one time, scan this QR code. All are welcome to participate fully at Church of the Redeemer. All races, all religions, all countries of origin, all sexual orientations, including LGBTQ+, and all genders. Church of the Redeemer, worshiping God, living in community, and reaching out to the world. We are an Episcopal church serving North King County and South Snohomish County, Washington. As you travel your road, go with friends walking the way of Jesus at Redeemer. The Episcopal Church welcomes you.